parts of glucose or sugar. It's one part of benzaldehyde and one part of cyanide. And people get all out of joint when you hear the word cyanide because they figure it's toxic. Well, cyanide is toxic when it's all by itself. In fact, they execute people with it. You can die from cyanide poisoning. But when cyanide is in combination with other components in a complex molecule, it's not necessarily toxic at all. In fact, it seldom is. Vitamin B12, which you mentioned a moment ago, also has cyanide in it. In fact, the technical name for B12 is cyanocobalamin. So you can tell just by the word that, yes, by golly, it's got cyanide in it. And yet cyanide is not toxic in vitamin B12. In fact, without it, we'd all be dead. So you could say that cyanide is a life-preserving component. Well, it's true in the amygdalin or the amygdalin molecule, the laetrile molecule. You do find cyanide, but it's locked in combination with glucose and benzaldehyde. And the only thing that unlocks it and releases that toxic component is an enzyme. I just call it the unlocking enzyme. Its technical name is beta-glucosidase. But we just call it the unlocking enzyme. So that's the only thing you have to look out for is what will release the toxic element. And it turns out that that enzyme, I hope everybody's sitting down for this, that enzyme is found in cancer cells and only in cancer cells. If you have this substance in your food supply, and it's readily available in nature, if you're eating the right foods, and you've got little trace amounts of this amygdalin in your bloodstream, and if you have a cancer cell in the process of developing, it develops along with it that unlocking enzyme. The two come together, and whammo, the cancer cell commits suicide, and the cells around it are not affected at all. And it's what modern medicine has been looking for decades, is something that's very selective to cancer only and non-toxic, in fact, even nourishing to the cells around it. Beautiful mechanism of nature, couldn't have been accidental. And the amazing thing is that this substance is free, which is why the pharmaceutical industry hates it. They don't want anybody to think about it. They don't want people to know about it. They want everybody to think it's quackery because they can't make a penny on it. It's free. It's found in nature. You can find it in foods. It's very effective. And you look at those cultures in the world, and there are many of them, relatively primitive cultures where cancer is unheard of. We're talking about places like Hunza and near northwest Pakistan. We're talking about the Navajo Indians, the Aboriginal Eskimos, the Vilcabambas in Europe. There's certain places around the world where cancer is almost unheard of or totally unheard of. And in every case, Chris, when you look at the native diets of these people, they eat foods that are very, very rich in amygdalin. Usually about 100 to 200 times more rich than the diet of the modern person in a civilized society, so-called. But there are other common things. I mean, they all are. They live a vigorous lifestyle. Maybe that's got something to do with it, the vigor of their lifestyle. Well, yeah, there are plenty of places in the world, though, where there's vigorous lifestyle, but they still don't have protection against cancer. So it's a very interesting topic, and so that's the reason that I got into it some years ago, and I wrote the book called World Without Cancer, the story of vitamin B17.
Very good. Well, my special guest today, G. Edward Griffin. If you'd like to find out more about his work, let me encourage listeners to navigate their web browsers to realityzone.com. That's RealityZone, realityzone.com. G. Edward, please tell folks more about what's happening with your Freedom Force as well as the Reality Zone.
Well, I know we don't have a lot of time. I'd like to speak for hours, if not days, on the Freedom Force International. What we're trying to do is solve the problem. Just being informed is not enough. Reading another book, having all the answers in our brains is not going to change the world. And the reason we're losing our freedoms is because there are people who really do not respect freedom, who are in control of our lives. They actually are in control of the power centers of society. They don't believe in freedom. They think that they should control and that we need to be protected. The more freedom we have, the more dangerous we are to society and so forth. It's a terrible situation, but the world is divided pretty much into two camps. One is with those who are collectivists, who believe in all governmental power, and then the rest of us are the individualists who believe in personal freedom. And it's kind of a battle to the finish between the two groups. Unfortunately, the collectivists are the ones who are in power today. And so we created an organization called Freedom Force International to try and show each other and help each other all around the world to come back to power, to take control back over our own governments, and put it into the hands of people who believe in personal freedom. That's really the purpose of Freedom Force International. We have members in about 50 or 51 countries, and so we have a problem like this everywhere in the world. And anybody that really wants to make a difference in the world and not just complain about it, and see that changes come about not by voting through this phony electoral system where people have been taught to believe that there's some kind of a difference between Republicans and Democrats. And as we see it, it's just the right and the left wing of the same ugly bird called collectivism. They may disagree over minor things, but on major policies, they're always in agreement. So if you really want to make a difference in the world and bring about a constructive change in the direction of freedom, please come to freedomforceinternational.org. That's our website. And plan to spend some time. I think you're going to like what you see there. And in the meantime, just come to our website, freedomforceinternational.org. And on the other site, the realityzone.com, that's our commercial site. That's where we grub for $1. That's where we try and sell books and videos and audios and so forth. We have about 100 great topics there, and I think your listeners will enjoy perusing that site as well. I hope they will.
All right, well, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. We want to have you back on.
Well, thanks a lot, Chris. It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for those kind remarks in my introduction.
You know, I'd like to begin with the housing bubble. In your first appearance on the show over 2 years ago, you told listeners that the home mortgage was quite possibly the worst investment an individual could make. This just flew in the face of the general consensus out there. And you also highlighted that the typical borrower would pay for a home 2 to 3 times over on a typical 30-year loan. Now, fast forward to today, and the Case-Shiller Index was off 16, almost 17% from just last year. That's about 20% from the peak for the typical house in this country. Suddenly, the world is facing a serious mortgage-related debt hangover that's threatening the entire system.